Hello, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you very much to everyone who's joining us today. My name is Shahab Kaviani, and I'll be moderating this event. And Dr. Tracy Brower is here with us as well. We are going to be talking about higher education's role in creating a sense of belonging. And just a few housekeeping items before we jump into things here. We will be having time for questions towards the end. Please just jump into the chat session and punch in your questions there. If we don't get to them immediately during the presentation, we certainly will have enough time towards the end. Also, today's session is being recorded, so if you'd like to share this with any of your colleagues, we would encourage you to do that as well. And just a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Shahab Kaviani. I'm the head of community here at Localist. I have a passion for building and engaging communities. I got my start as a community builder with an organization called Co-Founders Lab. We actually worked with about a dozen or so universities to create a networking events and online app for aspiring entrepreneurs and seasoned advisors to help new business formation, and also worked to launch a software product, which is a community management software. And when I joined Localists about a year ago, I was asked to help build our community around the hundreds of university clients that Localist is honored to be serving over the last 10 years. And this topic is very near and dear to my heart. Very excited to introduce Dr. Tracy Brower. And Tracy has been most recently the author of The Secret to Happiness at Work. She's currently serving as principal at Steelcase and is a regular contributor to Forbes magazine, amongst other publications as well. And with that, I'd like to welcome today's guest speaker, Tracy Brower.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shahab. I really appreciate it. And you and Localists are doing such amazing work. I'm just really, really honored to be with you and have this conversation about community. It's just so relevant today and critical and important. And what's it like to have the title Head of Community? That's a really, really cool thing. So I'm really glad that we're working together on this and that we share that passion. This is some of what we want to cover today, really thinking about colleges and universities and that really critical role that colleges and universities have. We've got some really wonderful research and fascinating insights related to belonging and community that we will talk about, and then just some pragmatic approaches. And we've got some wonderful guests, Richard and Mary, who are going to be talking a bit about a couple of stories that they have where they are really putting some of this into practice. And Localist has some amazing capability that is really strategic and really hits at the heart of this issue in some really important ways. So Shahab will share some of that. And we'll have time, as Shahab said, for questions and answers. So that's kind of where we're going. I love this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is a moment of such opportunity in terms of community. You know, I just feel like this is close and near and dear to my heart. I've attended 5 universities in the process of getting 3 degrees. So you can argue that I don't have a very good success rate. Our daughter graduated from college in 2020, Boston University. Our son graduated from high school and he is now a sophomore at University of Michigan. And in 2 kids worth, we have visited no less than 15 colleges and universities. And every one of them talked about the desire to build community and the importance of it. And I've been on the faculty at a couple of different colleges and universities. This is such important times for colleges and universities. And you all, I'm so grateful for all the work that you do, because this is the place that formation starts. I love the phrase, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And so you are at such a pivot point for youth and such a pivot point for young adults and non-traditional students as well. So really, really think that this is important times. So what is community? Let's start there. Communities, the best communities, the most stable, sustainable social systems in the form of community have a really strong sense of purpose and identity. And we talk about purpose and identity all the time in the corporate world and in other kinds of institutions and organizations. And colleges and universities do this brilliantly. I was actually with someone this morning from Arizona State University, and they're the Sun Dogs. And this gentleman said, yeah, I was in a completely different state, and I happened to have my Sun Dogs shirt on, sweatshirt on, and somebody was, making the Sun Dog symbol at me. The university and college experience is so formative and is so influential in terms of social identity and belonging. Belonging doesn't just come from being with our people. Belonging comes from a shared sense of social identity. So you all are so at the center of that. It's also about trust and a sense of psychological safety. It's about leadership that emerges and the way that we provide the opportunity for students to have that leadership emerge. And really great communities are absolutely sharing the characteristic of learning and stretch and adaptability and inclusivity. We draw that boundary based on social identity, and then we are inclusive within the community, and we are inclusive as we bring in diverse points of view. So I think it's really helpful to think about the unique role that colleges and universities have to play in the characteristics of what community really is. The power of college and university, I think, is really interesting to pause on as well. Your timing in the process of development of youth is so important, or the process of development in a non-traditional student, because when people put themselves out for learning, they're at a key stage in their life and they've put themselves out there at a key point. And so it's a formative place. And it's a time when people are especially open. Like you think about how you go along through your normal life and through your normal experiences, and you might be relatively open, but when you travel to a new country, you're especially open to tastes and smells and sounds and places and language and food and different things. And the university experience absolutely brings that kind of experience to the fore, that openness. I think the other thing about colleges and universities, especially those that have residential programs with non-traditional students, is you get this layering, right? Like I'm learning in a classroom with a cohort, and then I'm living with people, and I'm eating with people, and I'm enjoying a campus with people. And the layers give such power, and there's such influence in terms of where you are in people's lives. So thank you for all that you do. And that makes for such levels of responsibility and obligation in creating community. So here's some of the sobering news. We are at such a critical juncture in terms of mental health. 75% of people say that they feel socially isolated. That is perfectly correlated with working and learning from home. The more we are remote, the more we feel socially isolated, the more we feel depressed, anxious, even like trouble juggling our thoughts. Mental health is a very big deal. And among students, issues of mental health are higher than they've ever been before in multiple studies that come out literally weekly. There's a new study. So why are we exhausted? There's a beautiful sociological study that looked at people who were trying to make lifestyle changes. And part of the group received cheerleading feedback. Rah, rah, you can do it. The other part of the group received validating feedback. These are hard times. You are climbing a mountain. We will help you get through it, that kind of thing. The group that received validating feedback absolutely made more significant lifestyle changes. There is something really appropriate about taking a breath, looking around and saying, you know what, it's been tough and we've been through it. And it's interesting because we are going through it as individuals, and then we are in such positions of leadership to influence the students that are going through it as well. It's been hard in terms of social distance. We want to be close to our people, but we're not sure we feel safe. That introduces cognitive dissonance. It's been long, it's been intense, it's been uncertain. We think we're reaching the top of the mountain and we realize, oh, it's in the clouds. We're not yet to the summit. We have to climb some more. Boundaries have been blurred. We don't have the same boundaries between work and home, between learning and not. The boundaries of whether we're on campus together, whether we're remote, have caused a level of exhaustion and a level of uncertainty. And we've just had a lot more demands. We're caring for people who are elders, we're caring for neighbors, we're caring for loved ones, we're facilitating learning in different ways, not only as educators and leaders of colleges and universities, but for a lot of us as parents or aunts or uncles. So all of this gives us good reason to be somewhat exhausted. So if you're feeling it, you are not alone. So here's a question for you. I just launched a poll, so you can answer anytime you're ready. To what extent has your well-being been compromised over the last year and a half or so? A, significantly, the struggle is real. B, somewhat, it hasn't been easy, but I've been hanging in there. C, not so much, it hasn't been that bad for me. Or D, the jury is still out. I'll let you know in another little bit. So curious what you all are thinking. Go ahead and log your votes whenever you're ready. You know, this is one of those things that we might have an ebb and flow in how we're feeling. There might be days when we're feeling on top of it and other days when not so much. And I think that that is part of EQ too, understanding where we're at so we can absolutely be leading and supporting others. So interesting, you all say 30% of you significantly, 64% of you say somewhat. Nobody is unaffected. Look at that. And then some of you are saying, nope, the jury's still out. So super respect where you're at and super respect the unique place that each of us are. And again, the implication for this is to know our own sense of well-being so we can bring our best to our community, so we can build community together. So I like to shift to an optimistic point of view pretty early in the conversation. And I wrote an article about this about last year or so. And I thought, you know, on the one hand, we can all say, gosh, how are we going to be scarred by this experience? Us as kind of adults and students who are in their formative years in particular. But what if there's a positive here? What if we build empathy because we're so aware of people around us and their health and well-being? What if we reprioritize and we realize how important family is to us? What if we stretch and learn new skills? What if we're especially grateful for all the small things? And what if we're able to adapt really effectively? This might be the what if generation. So let's keep glass half full and talk about how community matters. This is what's so important about community. And I love to start with the science because I think so many of us are evidence-oriented these days. One is that we crave community, we crave people. We are hardwired for connection. When we are face to face with our people, we get a hit of oxytocin, which helps us feel better. That's the brain chemical that helps us feel happier. It is also the brain chemical that tamps down the more difficult implications of things like adrenocorticotropin and cortisol, which are stress chemicals, which can be difficult for us to work through every day when those are released. And so when we're together with our people, scientifically, we have less morbidity and less mortality. We are hardwired to be together. When we experience social exclusion or ostracism, we experience that pain in the same part of our brain where we experience physical pain. If people have a lack of belonging, it is a reason they will disengage. It is a reason that they will report less mental well-being. And this is actually interesting because we see it across species. And when we see conservation across species, we know it is even more important for us in terms of how we're hardwired. So how else does this matter? One of the things that we often hear from leaders is, Tracy, how much does this really matter? And what about it makes a difference? Is this just soft? And I think the answer is absolutely no. We need to reach students and really develop audiences. And that's something that Shahab will talk about, and that's something that Localist brings. But when we reach students, when we develop audiences, when we develop senses of belonging, when we have systems to do that across a university, across a college experience, that helps in terms of our brain chemistry because we feel that greater level of well-being. The other thing that matters here is really cross-pollination of ideas, and that's something that Localist helps with as well, and Shahab will unpack that. But this matters to us because it contributes to our happiness. When we are happier, when we feel more connected, we report greater physical health. And so for organizations, that looks like a lot less healthcare costs. It looks like a lot more people showing up to class and people being retained with an organization. We're more physically healthy when we're happier and when we have a sense of community. When we're happier and have a sense of community, we set bigger goals. We're more likely to reach those goals. We're more interested in learning and stretch. And that looks like engagement in classrooms, which is so much more energizing, not only for students, but also for faculty and instructors. When we are happier and feel greater senses of community, we perform better. We are more likable. There's also a spillover effect. When we're happier outside of the work that we do, we tend to perceive greater happiness inside of the work that we do, and the opposite. When we are happy at work, that tends to spill over into our personal lives. That has implications for staff, for faculty, for instructors. And so this is also operating at the country level, which kind of puts me over the top in terms of buying the data. When countries' citizens report greater connectivity, greater community, greater happiness, they have greater GDP, they have greater educational attainment, and they have greater physical health. So this idea of community and happiness is a very big one. And this cross-pollination, and Shahab will talk more about this, but this cross-pollination helps us build community because it is about netting, it's about webbing, it's about social capital. And when we feel more integration across the people that we know and the people that we work with, that is when we absolutely see some of these payoffs. There's wonderful data that when we're more connected, we feel more mentally healthy, we have better mental health and physical health. And that is true when we're getting support from somebody in our network. In addition, when the people in our network that support us know each other, we tend to have even better outcomes in terms of mental health and physical health. So this webbing and this netting are actually extraordinarily evidence-based. So really interesting to think about that cross-pollination among students, faculty, parents, instructors, teachers, all of those. Also, it's important to think about happiness in terms of some of our myths. We tend to have a myth that we should always be happy. And if we're not always happy every minute with bonbons and butterflies, we must not be doing something right. In reality, happiness ebbs and flows. And we can be overall joyful, contented, even if we have good days and bad days. I think that's important for us to realize in community. Sometimes communities will struggle. Sometimes students will struggle. Sometimes we'll have classes that are really hard to engage students in. Sometimes we'll have difficult enrollment for a year. Sometimes a student will struggle. One of the things we know as a trend is that students are seeking tutoring more in the last 2 years than they have in the past because they're struggling at other levels as well. But what we can do is think about happiness as an ongoing thing. Every choice we make has pros and cons. And what we want to do is choose as much as possible something that is aligned with what's most important to us. I'm in a parents group for University of Michigan, and there was a mom who had a child from California. And she said, I'm really worried about my child because she's going to get really cold and she's got to wait for the bus. And I don't know if she's going to be able to survive those Michigan winters. And, you know, it was really great. The feedback she got was, first of all, your kid is empowered, and part of being part of a community is learning new things and learning new norms. But also your child made a selection that has pros and cons. And we don't have California weather in Michigan, but we have wonderful other elements of this university that are positive. So I think we can remind ourselves about every choice we make has both pros and cons. And so that is part of the community as well. We can build each other up when we feel strong. We can ask for help when we need it. And we know that that webbing and that netting is part of that choice making when we're all living through pros and cons. The happiness paradox is also important to know about because it's related to community. If we pursue happiness for its own sake, we're less likely to accomplish it because it reminds us we don't have enough. It keeps us focused on ourselves. But when we focus on creating the conditions for happiness, which we'll talk about, creating the conditions for community, that is when we tend to accomplish happiness more effectively. When we focus on things like purpose and social identity, when we focus on creating connections among people, when we focus on providing opportunities for stretch and growth, when we focus on things about which we can feel grateful, those are some of the things that contribute to happiness. And so a more direct route to community, a more direct route to happiness is to really create those conditions. So we'll talk more about that. So here's a question for you, and I will launch this poll. Curious from your point of view, to what extent does your organization focus on well-being, engagement, and happiness? So tell us a little bit about your institution. A, to a great extent, it's top of mind for us all the time. B, somewhat, there are a lot of priorities to juggle, but it's on the radar screen. C, a bit, although it doesn't receive very much focus. Or D, I need more time to think about this one. So curious from your perspective, as we think about community, it is significantly about well-being. It is significantly about engagement. It is significantly about happiness, and curious where you all come out on this one. So it looks like you're pretty well voted. Let me share the results here. This is interesting, right? If we turn it on its side, it's almost a normal distribution. 13% of you say to a great extent, it's top of mind. 48% of you are saying somewhat. 35% of you are saying a bit. And some of you need some more time to think, or maybe another cup of coffee. It's kind of that time of day. This is, I think, really interesting. One of the things we know is this focus on community, on well-being, on engagement is absolutely a trend going forward in workplaces and in learning institutions, because it's a differentiator. People are wanting to know about the extent to which community is part of the learning experience they choose. People want to know whether well-being, whether happiness are on the radar screen in terms of the experience their child is going to get, or they are going to get as a student themselves. So this is so about success in business as much as it's about the well-being for people. This is really interesting. One of the most significant contributors to bonding is surviving hard times together. This kind of goes out with that what if idea I was talking about earlier, you know, like what if we can learn so much through this that we build our resilience, we build our adaptability. And this has been so tough for colleges and universities, sending everybody home, closing down campuses, or doing all online learning have not been easy for anybody. So these are moments when we can move forward. So here are the things that we can do to create community. As you're thinking about creating community as a differentiator, as you're thinking about creating community, these are the things that will matter most. One is purpose. This one's really important because When people have a sense of purpose, they have a much more likelihood statistically to be happy. It's also true that when they have a sense of purpose, they will learn more, they will engage more, they will have a more positive experience at the university. And this is also about our obligations to each other. When a community has a strong sense of purpose, we feel like we want to bring our best to it. We all have an instinct to matter. And I think this is an interesting one as we think about students. You know, when we recruit students, when we do college visits for all those potential students, we say, as a university and as a college, we're going to help you achieve your dreams. We're going to help you change the world. And that might actually feel like a lot of weight on the shoulders of 18 and 19 and early 20-year-olds or non-traditional students. Sometimes it's a really good idea to dream small and just know that the thing you're interested in is the thing you should keep learning about. The thing you do well is the thing that you should continue to do as you contribute to your community. This is related to Localist too, and Shahab will talk about this, but this is about creating critical mass in groups where we can feel together like we're rolling up sleeves and pursuing a goal, creating critical mass in terms of topics that people want to learn about and want to engage on. So all those are really, really interesting to consider. Here is another way to create community, and that is through connections and generosity. Belonging, as I said, isn't just about being together. It's not just about living in the dorm together or showing up at the community college together and sharing a class. It's not just about doing the project together. It is also about the shared sense of social identity. And so the more we can bring that together for people and not just create a sense of shared identity, but create a sense for people about how they matter to that shared identity, how they are part of that whole. You know, people report that they want to be in class because they want to socialize. People want to be at work because they want to socialize. But this isn't just about shooting the breeze about the game last weekend. While that has value for sure, it's also about social nurturance, social fabric, social capital, where I am creating those connections that mean the most. And actually, I want to invite Richie to join us here. Would love to hear about, Richie, you've been doing some amazing things in terms of how you are helping to create community and remove barriers related to that. So let me be quiet and you tell us some stories.
Sure, well, thank you again. Yeah, so I tend to look at removing barriers more on a macro level when it comes to our residential students. And one of those components in particular is our residential move-in at the beginning of the year. And so what we did is we took a hard, long look at how students were moving in and revamped it so that we moved away from the traditional move-in component where you have to unpack your own belongings and brought in a third-party provider to help our students and the parents unload those items for them, which actually saves them about 6 hours of time, which may not sound like a lot, but during move-in, that's a very stressful period for parents and for students. And so by removing the literal physical stress, but also the mental stress of moving in, we give them those hours back so that they can start that socialization on their floors that much earlier and that much sooner so that they begin to meet those friends and build those relationships.
That is so amazing. Speaking as a parent who has spent 6 hours or more lugging stuff up and down stairs in the hot summer day, that's incredible, Richie. The thing that I think is so interesting about it is that it also, you're creating such a welcoming, right, environment. Like it's easier to make connections because you feel like you're welcomed. You feel like you're part of a fabric of something. Like when somebody like comes up to you in an orange t-shirt or a red t-shirt or name your color, you know, and takes that tote out of your hands and says, that's incredible. Tell us what university you're with and just any other color commentary you want to add.
Sure. So I'm with the University of Miami down here in Miami, Florida. And so August and move-in is definitely hot and humid. So anything we could do to help parents and students out definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you have even clocked it. Like, it's 6 hours worth, and this really interesting thing to me that I think is such a best practice too, is you're measuring it, but then you're measuring like, what's the impact on them being able to make connections and build community. And so, like you could measure and come to a lot of different conclusions about that, but you're connecting it to the community piece, which I just think is really, really cool. We'll make sure to put your contact information in the chat. So thank you for sharing that story. That's incredible, just incredible. So here's another quick poll question for you all. Let me get to this third poll question. All right. To what extent does your organization provide structured opportunities for connections? A, thoroughly, we have so much opportunity. B, to a degree, it's a mix of people's efforts and our efforts. C, we really leave it up to the students to drive it. Or D, I'll get back to you after I schedule this get together. So go ahead and let us know how formal that is. This is so interesting. I think it's such a philosophical debate in the college and university community, in the community building literature. Like, you want to empower people and leave them lots of freedom, but you also want some structure. There's some lovely new data about structure in things, even like Zoom happy hours. Like, it's really hard for people to mingle, particularly virtually, without some structure. It's also hard to mingle in person without some structure. A lot of times it's the extraordinary extroverts who are actually meeting new people, and everybody else is talking to people they already knew. So there is some interesting research on this. We've got another normal distribution. If we turn this on its side, 28% of you are saying thoroughly, 52% of you to a degree, 16% of you are offering lots of empowerment, and some of you are going to get back to us after you put together the get together. So thank you for that. It's really interesting. And this is part of culture too, right? Culture of a college and university, and the extent to which that's important for you to offer. So here's another piece. So how do you develop community? Through purpose, through community and generosity, and through resilience. When we create a sense of resilience, that creates really sustainable communities, because communities need to get through things together. They need to marshal resources. They need to adapt. And how do we create resilience? First, we have to know the circumstances. This is so not about burying your head in the sand. This is really staying aware, even when the news is tough and when we're in tough circumstances. Then we need to make sense of it. How does it relate to me specifically? How does it relate to my stage in life? How does it relate to my culture, to my university? And then it's all about problem solving and improvising. I think about this as the MacGyver effect, right? For those of you who are old enough, you remember MacGyver, a TV show in the 90s. If you're younger enough, you remember it as a remake. MacGyver was this like high action hero dude, and he would always get into lots of scrapes. But when he was in a really difficult situation, if he had a paper clip and a stick of chewing gum, he could make rocket ships and get himself out of it. That is resilience. It is figuring out how to do it differently. Or the biggest barriers really bring up the greatest opportunities for innovation. And we have been through some really difficult times. I wrote an article not too long ago about graduation and how critical graduation is for communities, how critical those rituals are for communities. And so many organizations, colleges, universities didn't have the opportunity to do anything in the same way. And Mary, you've got a wonderful story about how you've really thought about resilience and thought about your population.
Yes, thank you, Tracy. At UT Southwestern, our academic deans and our director of student services were confronted with commemorating something as hard-earned and significant as the major life milestone of graduating from medical school. That's the big deal, right? It's a huge deal. So we did this virtually in 2020. We did a hybrid approach in 2021. And to kick it off, we did a design thinking exercise rooted in empathy. So we brainstormed about what the most significant emotional touch points that occur in the typical real life experience. And frankly, we were heartbroken that they wouldn't get all those things. And so it was very motivating for us to do our best to look at things like the elegance of the regalia, the closeness of those in their cohort or college, the heartfelt words or a look from a mentor and so on. We sought as a team to recreate through power of video, power of narrative, power of pretty amazing photography, to not only capture, but even enhance the experience, and to even be something that they could go back and relive. So it had a special sweetness. We honored their outstanding achievements, and we strengthened the community doing a number of things. We promoted them on social by telling their individual stories. We took over our medical school landing page and made it all about them, made it all about the camaraderie of our 6 colleges, their awards, snapshots all along the way of their medical journey, which we had never done before, but we wanted to capitalize on that medium as a way to communicate their value. And it ended up yielding evergreen content that was beautiful, that showed the interconnectedness between students, their families, their mentors. And then as COVID marched on, unfortunately, we created that unique experience for our School of Health Professions, for our Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences. And as a sidebar, by digging in together, and I know you guys have felt this too, digging in the trenches, whether it's virtual recruitment or graduation, along the whole spectrum of things that we do for students, we really got to know each other even better as a team. So we have this connectedness and bond through diligence and hard work, and kind of this, even though I'm in my home office, the blood, sweat, and tears of making that stuff happen, and really seeing other colleagues come through. So kind of got multiple levels of community that compounded through the experience.
Wow. And you so speak to that, like when you go through really hard times, it actually bonds you. And as you're talking, it's just so powerful. I'm reflecting on like how your bonds as staff, faculty, pulling together to create this for students is then mirrored in the way that you're creating community and bonds for the students. That's really cool. That's really cool. Did you get feedback on it from the students? It sounds amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very positive.
They were crazy about it.
Yes, I think they felt very special. And I came to know our academic dean, our director of student services. I held them with an even higher regard than I already did, because you saw their heart and passion. So very good feedback.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. And such a great point about heart and passion. Like when we share that heart and passion too, that comes out, right? Mm-hmm. Interesting. I mentioned our son's in school and he has this class. I won't say what type of class it is, but it's kind of not a super exciting class. And then he's got this class that you would normally think would be super exciting, but the super not exciting class, he's got this awesome professor and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I love this class, but it's because of her, right? And then this other class, the professor's not so great. Anyway, my point is that we all have a mixed bag and there's chemistry in terms of who we connect with for sure. But the uniting thing is passion, it's caring, it's creating the thing that you created based on really caring about the experience of those students. So very cool. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, another thing that we do to create community is provide for psychological safety and stretch. When we can give people a sense of safety, I've got your back, I will give you feedback, I'm not going to let you crash and burn, we can stretch even more. And the more we stretch, the more we experience happiness, the more we experience community, because we're trying something new, we're engaging together, we're rolling up our sleeves, and we feel mutual accomplishment, and we're reminded of our own capability. And then finally, where do we go in the future, and how is future part of this idea of community? This is about empowering students. This is about empowering faculty and staff. This is about empowering everybody in the community, including parents, and Shahab will talk about that, as I mentioned. This is also about guiding for the future. This is about helping to create social capital across the community. And I think it's important that we articulate how much we value community, articulate and recognize the contributions that individuals make to the whole, articulate and tell stories. You mentioned narratives, each of you tell stories and narratives about what we're learning, about where we're going, and about how we all as a connected community will make it happen together. So it is amazing how a little tomorrow can make up for a whole lot of yesterday. So with that, let me turn it to Shahab. He's going to make this much more real for us and really take us into more about building audiences, critical mass, linking stakeholders, and more. So go ahead, Shahab. I'll be quiet now.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation. Thanks again to our panelists, Mary Lee and Richie, for joining us today. Definitely learning a lot from your all experiences. Before I launch into this next section of the session, we have been talking a lot about sort of student examples. And as I'm hearing the importance of having a sense of purpose, and going through difficult challenges, the benefits of that, and creating tighter bonds. I'm reminded of much of the work I was involved with at AARP when we were working on this issue of social isolation and loneliness amongst older adults, which affects about one in four older Americans. And so, hope we can, try to apply much of the lessons and insights we've learned today to students, faculty, staff, and parents who can benefit from some of the new programs and new ways that we've talked about here today. With that, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about how Localists in a practical way can help address and implement some of the ideas that were brought up today by Tracy Brower. And we have at Localists, we have been serving universities and colleges for over 10 years, and really proud to include some of the schools that you see here on this slide. And we really believe that the most effective lever to create a sense of community is through events. And that's what I'd like to talk a little bit about today, is how universities and colleges can do that better. And how do we serve our customers? We help them centralize calendars across the entire school system and control their brand. So whatever the event is, it might be a meetup, it might be a Facebook Live, that all of those events are discoverable on a central calendar, and you can register for those in a single place. Localist is very unique in that sense, as we support free events, paid events, virtual, online meetups, in order to provide a complete picture of each community member, to see what is it that they are interested in order to better recommend additional events to draw them back into the center of the community. Some of the schools that we work with before they come to Localists are managing these registrations on different systems, and aren't able to really build that full picture. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, and so just to put this into some context of where this fits in, some of you may be using tools like Eventbrite for event management, or Cvent, which are great for one-time events and conferences or ticketed events. One of the tricks that we've seen schools apply really effectively is offering free events, or events that may not even require registration. You just want to remind them that it's happening, and they want to raise their hand and show that they're interested, and create that momentum to get more people to join. And some of you maybe also be using marketing automation tools like Salesforce and HubSpot. Well, what Localist does is we really bring all those capabilities into a single solution, and you can think of it as a CRM for events. So how do we practically do this, and what is the solution footprint that we cover? Well, it's deploying your marketing. You'll see in the sort of top box, measuring engagement in the bottom box, and then completing that loop and driving into the data of attendees and how they've engaged with your events. So working with Localists, we white label a calendar on your main website to make those discoverable. We publish those events across all sorts of channels. You can schedule them through social media, email, and get the greatest exposure, as well as just making it discoverable on search. So you show up automatically on search results as people are looking into a particular topic or an area that they might need help with. And then next we get into the measuring engagement. In order to do that, as I mentioned earlier, we have to collect registration information across all of our event types. So we process the registration, we collect payments for those events that may be paid, and we have some features that help increase attendance rates. And then you'll host your event. And if it's a virtual event, we integrate with the more popular platforms and are certified by Zoom and others to easily pass data back and forth and launch those events from within the Localist platform. And this last stage is where I think there's a lot of room for improvement, particularly as we're moving to more virtual and hybrid events. Because it's digital, you have a larger footprint of data to collect. And by collecting that information as to when they registered, when they joined, when they might have dropped off, sending out post-event assessments, and we connect that to the event, to the individual, in order to measure the things that are most important in these events, which is building connections. That is the Localist mission. And a lot of what we're talking about today is to help create authentic connections. And those that information will be tracked to see, did this event do that? And also mine the post-event insights to discover new events that your audience might be interested in, and really and be able to replay events with confidence that are really landing with your community. So as I mentioned, this slips right seamlessly into your website. We'll go to the next slide here. And Tracy alluded to this a little earlier about cross-pollination. We do see customers, before they come to Localists, have a bit of a fragmented approach to this. They'll have the law school may have their own calendar, and the business school may have their own calendar. But we really see significant gains when you start to cross-pollinate and centralize that. At the end of the day, they're all members of your community and have different interests. And the more we can get that sort of cross-campus collaboration, the more likely we are to create those authentic connections. And also by making content, your library of events, your calendar of events, easily searchable based on different topics of interest, we can pull together greater density around a particular topic to increase the chances that a connection will be made, right? So you'll have more of a chance to meet one or two people in an event that has 70 people versus 20 people. And so creating that critical mass around that interest is something I think our customers really rely on Localists for. So how does this show up? Here is a calendar of events from the from the University of the Pacific, and you can see that this snaps right into their existing website, and it's browsable, it's visual, you can filter. And we'll go to the next slide here, where you get to the actual event page. And over the last 10 years, we have learned a lot of the best practices to remove the friction of registering and increasing the chances that people will attend the event. So making sure we have a visual. You won't see it on this screen, but making sure they know how to get there with a map thumbprint, that they know what the event is about and who the audience is for. maybe in some cases not even requiring a registration, just letting them add it to their calendar. And if they happen to be free, they'll show up. We have a really neat feature here, which is one of my favorites, where people can click on "I'm interested," and so they just want to wait and see if there's enough of their friends and people that they're interested in connecting with, and they can have pre-event conversations and have a whole dialogue around the event before it actually launches. And here's how we present the information around the post-event insights that I talked about earlier. So in the dashboard after every event, we're able to provide you with insights on how many promoters you have. It's a little hard to see on this slide, but you'll see there's sort of the promoters in that left bar chart, how many passive folks, how many detractors. And on the right, you have this spider chart measuring, are you growing your audience? Are there new people who you attracted through this event? Were connections made? Do they plan on coming back, and do they find the information useful? So we really honed in on what we think are the critical measurement factors to help inform your go forward community event strategy. And as we're sort of wrapping up here, I want to thank all of the Localist customers who are here today. We want to announce that we've put together a referral program for any of your colleagues that might be in another school or another college within your campus. That we have the new Refer a Friend program you might have seen within the knowledge base recently. And finally, I just want to highlight the local street community. The next slide is we consider you part of our community now that you are attending this event. Local Street is a community that Localist is the premier sponsor of, and we want to invite more partners, schools, organizations to help grow this community. We see a tremendous opportunity for creating our own professional community of practice. So you'll get to meet folks like, Richie from the University of Miami, who's the Director of Conference Services and Senior Associate for, and Director of Housing and Operations and Facilities. And Mary Lee, who's the Director of Digital Experience and Communications and Marketing and Public Affairs at UT Southwestern. So you'll begin to meet digital marketing professionals, community engagement professionals, event marketers in this community, and begin exchanging your challenges and solutions and what's working. We're in fact currently assembling a steering committee. And if you are interested in being part of the early shaping of this community, we ask that you reach out to us. I'll be putting my contact information up in a moment. And please visit localstreet.community. I think you may have just seen a chat there, and you can click on that and bookmark that. For those of you who are new to Localist, also in the chat, you can learn more about Localist and how we serve the higher education market. And then finally, some of the events, we're going to see more events like this for the higher education professionals. In the meantime, we wanted to highlight a event that we call Bridgio. It's a community leaders brain trust, and it happens about once a month. There are over 300 people who are already a member. They come in, and it's a great way to grow your network and exchange ideas. So this is all happening on October the 14th, and you can register for that free event at localstreet.com, or excuse me, localstreet.community. And with that, we'd like to bring things to a wrap, and we do have a few minutes to field some questions. Let's go ahead and open that up. And if you have any questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat, and we'll share that with the rest of the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Shahab. Such a great conversation. And Mary and Richie might be open to questions too with the awesome stories they shared and best practices. So any questions, you can let us all know. Such interesting times for community. Anything you want to start us out with, Shahab?
Sure. As we're waiting for some of the questions to come up, and I know we're kind of bumping up against the time we had on everyone's calendar. Let's see if we can ask a couple of questions that I would have, or I think are commonly asked. Why is community so important within a college and university setting?
You know, the thing that I think about is that community is so especially important in a learning setting because community gives you that sense of psychological safety. It gives you that sense of connectedness, and that helps you try new things. Like learning is by definition taking some risks, like risks with your thinking, there's something new to me, or risks with projects that you do, or risks that you're trying in terms of bringing in new information from really diverse points of view. And when we have a strong community, it really allows us to do that very effectively because we feel like we're covered by our community and we're protected enough to try new things. And that's kind of the definition of that learning environment. So.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read another question here. I think this is for Richie. Who did the university use for the assisted move-ins?
Yeah, so we utilized a company called University and Student Services, and happy to help folks out. If they have any questions there, feel free to send me an email or hit me up on LinkedIn, and happy to guide people.
That's great. That's great.
Terrific, thank you. We have another question here. With virtual learning growing so fast, what are some good tactics for building those close student networks or study groups?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll go really quickly and then hand it back to you to bring us home, Shahab. But, I think it's all about creating proximity, whether it's real or perceived. So that is about asking people to leave their cameras on. It's about doing virtual breakout groups. It's about assigning projects where people have to actually get together in small groups outside of the classroom setting. It's about setting up face-to-face opportunities when that's possible, if people live close enough to the same location. But I think it's also finally a lot of different things layered on together. No one thing is probably going to do it, but it's probably a mix of both virtual and face-to-face to the extent that's possible. So I'll hand it back to you, Shahab. I know we're right at the hour.
Those are great tips. I'll just respond to that question by sharing something I recently learned. I'm teaching a capstone at UPenn, and last week we were encouraged to open the session with it was actually, we spent a significant period of time, 35-40 minutes on reconnecting. And we had a bank of questions and everyone would answer those, like, what's keeping you up at night? What's keeping you together? And I think having that dialogue out in the open, that we're all going through similar challenges today, and just sort of just humanizes everyone in the room, and that vulnerability really, I think, helped soften up the dialogue for later when we were talking about the information in the curriculum itself. While we're up on our time, I really hope you all enjoyed this event. Come join us again. Please visit us on the local street community for future events. Again, thank you to our panelists, Mary Lee and Richie. We really appreciate you being here today. And a special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brower. Check out her book. For the first 20 folks who attended today, you'll be getting a complimentary book courtesy of Localist. And we hope to see you again. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thanks, you all.